Welcome back to the Maple Pill. I'm your host, as always, Matt McKeever. And just a quick reminder, in case this is your first episode of checking us out on the Maple Pill, essentially the idea here is I'm going to cover 5 stories every single weekday, news stories that is, that have a Canadian bent, and really just kind of share my perspective, my opinions, and we're going to take you through the entire journey of being blue pilled, red pilled, black pill, clown pill, and then finally white pill. And they say the spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down a bit easier, so hence the maple pill. Hope you guys are having a good Tuesday. Hope you're off to a great start of your week. Smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. I guess let's just kind of jump into the first story. Now, I know we're only 2 episodes into this entire endeavor of the maple pill. I'm going to try and keep myself calm, cool, and collected for this story, but this one actually really grinds my gears. So again, my apologies if I kind of go off the rail, but let's jump into it. Quebec now is proposing or planning to impose significant financial penalty against people who refuse to get vaccinated. Now, this is so frustrating. And in fact, this really feels like an escalation of things that we were just talking about yesterday in regards to, we were talking about some of the new rules that, countries like Austria, Greece, and Germany are either imposing or looking to impose upon their citizens. And now Quebec, not wanting to be left behind in the game of, being the first biggest fascist, they've essentially decided to enter into the foray. So let's jump into it, and then I'll give you guys my opinion on it. But this doesn't seem very promising for Quebec. And reminder, Quebec's already kind of a crazy province. And someday I'm going to figure out how to get this Zoom working appropriately. So, Quebec Premier François Legault announced the province will apply a significant financial penalty for residents who refuse to get vaccinated against COVID-19 for non-medical reasons. The premier made the announcement at a news conference Tuesday afternoon, describing the measures as a healthcare contribution, though the exact amount has not yet been determined. Now, the province... Okay, here we go. The province is consulting with the finance minister and its legal advisors about implementing the measure, but Legault already said $50 or $100 is not significant enough. The tax would apply to all adults in Quebec who refuse to get their first dose of the vaccine in the next few weeks. According to the premier, people who have medical exemptions to vaccination will not have to pay the tax. The unvaccinated will have to pay a bill because there are consequences on our healthcare network, and it's not up to all Quebecers to pay for this, the premier said. It's a question of equity, because right now these people put a very important burden on our healthcare network, and I think it's normal that the majority of the population is asking there be consequences, he continued. Now, I could have sworn that, here in Canada, if you're in a decent tax bracket, you're probably paying 50% or more in total taxes. I would have thought that should kind of cover us in regards to, our contributing to the overall healthcare system. And it's wild to see them just wanting more money for us. And again, this isn't about actually trying to, hire more doctors. This isn't about trying to hire more nurses. This is really just about trying to penalize or arguably implement, psychological warfare on their own citizens. So jumping over to an AP article that just kind of hit upon it as well from a slightly different angle, the majority are asking that there be consequences. It's a question of fairness. For the 90% of the population that have made some sacrifices, we owe them. And reminder, Quebec is the province also that already announced a curfew, because as we mentioned yesterday, it turns out that COVID's like a vampire that really loves to strike at night. So right now in Quebec, they've got a curfew from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. And officials say that'll come off as soon as they're able to do so. It's wild to me to think that we pay so much in taxes and they're just looking to penalize Canadians further. And let's understand who's actually going to get penalized by this. Those of us that can just afford a random head tax or a surtax or whatever they're going to try and frame this as, because we choose to, be responsible for our own medical decisions. How dare we? But that seems to be their perspective in all this. Essentially, it's not really going to change anyone's opinion. However, people that maybe are homeless, people that are on the margins of society, this actually could have real negative consequences for them. And do you really want to be coercing people into a medical decision because of financial penalties? This is serious stuff. And it's shocking to see this being implemented in Canada, and not only just implemented in Canada, but being done so in such an uncouth manner. I don't know, it just drives me crazy. And so one last thing to understand here, when we're thinking about people being taxed due to their medical decisions, This opens Pandora's box, in my opinion, and not just my opinion, in regards to where this may lead down the road. So here's a quick little snippet from Rebel News. And again, reminder, all the articles we're going to discuss today are in the video description down below. So I really do encourage you guys to do your own due diligence. Don't let this show be the end of your journey for information, but really let this just be kind of the beginning or one of the steps in your journey for information. But from Rebel News, it's unclear if the Premier has intentions to stretch this line of logic further. As such, a measure would seemingly open the door to levying taxes on individuals living unhealthy lifestyles. And so this is commonly one of the arguments you'll hear the moment governments start talking about picking on individuals for their individual lifestyle choices. What about fat people? What about just really tall people? It turns out really tall people actually have significant health consequences as well. They don't live as long and things of that nature. What about smokers? What about drinkers? What about people that do pot? What about people that do illicit or other drugs? Again, it's wild to think that we live in a society that's okay with, handing out essentially like having methadone clinics, that's handing out clean needles, but at the same time, we're going to penalize individuals that decide they don't want to inject themselves with something because of their own medical choices. This is a really slippery slope, and we need to be paying attention as Canadians, because we've often seen this where as soon as the doors cracked open, all of a sudden a bunch of other politicians, premiers jump in, and all of a sudden we've got a dog pile of trying to see who can out-fascist the others. And so while this is really frustrating, this really does grind my gears, there is a little bit of good news in regards, or at least temporary good news. Maybe that's the better way to frame it. But essentially, BC came out saying that they currently don't have any intentions to implement a similar sort of tax on individuals that choose to make their own medical decisions. So health officials in British Columbia have no plans to demand payment from those who choose not to get COVID-19 vaccine, the province top doctor said. Now, again, even this language always kind of makes me a little nervous, because when I hear things like doesn't plan, right? Well, that's not like a definitive statement where, okay, I can hang my hat on that and know with certainty that they're never going to come after me. And so diving a little bit deeper into this, this is a direct quote from BC's provincial health officer from Tuesday today. We're taking the measure that we feel are important to address what we're seeing here and now. I don't foresee making it mandatory for vaccinations for everybody in the province, Henry said. I think we have very strong support for vaccination, and it's really important in specific settings, and we've mandated them in some, and I know many other sectors have stood up to make sure that all of the workers and people who are in those settings are protected as well through vaccination. So that is mildly good news that at least right now, BC's not planning to follow suit in regards to what Quebec's measures are. We also had a quick statement from the Premier's office in Alberta. So essentially, Alberta has not considered and is not considering bringing any kind of non-compliance vaccine tax. So again, Quebec gone full batshit crazy, in my opinion. BC and Alberta are saying they currently don't have any plans, but how long that will last, time will tell. But I think it's more important than ever before. Quebecers, Montrealers, you guys need to step up and speak out, right? If you were on the sidelines, if you thought that you could just kind of skate through this, if you thought you could just be indifferent, I think this should be one of those real cruxes where you decide, okay, I need to stand up. I need to start making my voice heard. I need to really start making my politicians, and not just the politicians, but those that enforce the rules of the politicians, understand that this isn't okay. I'm not okay with it. We're not okay with it. And you need to speak out, or you need to get the hell out of Quebec, because it's absolutely insane. My understandings are, and you guys can fact check me on this, but Quebec has the strictest measures out of all of North America. And yet there's no significant sign that these extreme draconian measures are really having a net positive or a net benefit to Quebecers. It's really weird how we notice that a lot of these jurisdictions where they've got the strongest enforcement of rules, they don't necessarily seem to reap any benefits from it. And they never seem to be able to get through those enforcement policies. They always just seem to be looking for more enforcement policies to add on to the ones they already have. They're never looking at actually dialing it back. This is really concerning. And again, if you're from Quebec, I'm sorry you find yourself in this situation. You really should just be allowed to live and let live and, go along to get along. But it's very obvious your politicians will refuse to allow you to do so. And once this door is opened, again, we're going to see this spill into other consequences. It's obviously going to come up with boosters down the road, and who knows what other sort of measures they may want to take in order to mandate how you live your life, in order to mandate how you approach your own health. If you don't have autonomy over your own body, I mean, what do you really have autonomy over? It's wild. It blows my mind and it really grinds my gears. But, anyways, let's move on to the red pill story of the day. And this one is just, I don't know. This one's wild in my opinion as well. So this is from the Hill Times. And again, links in the video description down below. Feds report 326.1 million in lost revenue, public money, property in 2020 to 2021. So you may be thinking, that seems like a lot of money, but I don't know, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe we lose $300 million every year. I just didn't realize it. No, it actually does turn out that is a big dollar amount. So the federal government reported a total of 326.1 million in lost federal revenue, public money, and public property due to fraud, accidents, or offenses in 2020 to 2021, up 34.7% compared to 2019 to 2020. An increase of 34.7%. Now, understand, whenever we see governments implementing new policies, whenever we see governments implementing new spending campaigns, it always just seems to fall off. The wheels seem to fall off of the cart here. And this is definitely the case again, where $326 million, that's a lot of money. And it's wild. Now, there's some pretty crazy examples, and this is actually a very in-depth article. So I encourage you guys to spend some time and check it out. But I did just take a handful of highlights here that I wanted to cover with you guys in today's red pill story. However, those losses were incurred through less than half the number of incidences, with a total of 43,201 cases in 2020 to 2021 compared to 104,399 cases the year before. During the most recent fiscal year, the vast majority, some 105.1 million of lost public money, was tied to 3 cases of unfulfilled contracts by vendors reported by Public Health Agency of Canada. So I don't know. Maybe I don't give the government enough credit, but I'm really concerned of the fact that the prior period we had 104,000 cases, and now we only have 43,000 cases. If I had to guess, I'm going to guess that there's actually just a bunch of cases we didn't catch, and odds are it's even probably higher than the $300 million that we were just talking about. Again, there are consequences to losing our money. There are consequences to fraud. There are consequences to these contracts that never get fulfilled. And a big question as well is, like, if these contracts, if we're able to get by without them being fulfilled, did we need those contracts in the first place? Again, there's a lot of different contracts that are covered in this, so I'm sure there are some justifications for at least some of them, but all of them? I'm not sure. So the agency is currently pursuing court action against 2 of those vendors, both of whom were contracted to provide respirators, masks, and is suing Montreal company Tango for $82 million plus interest and costs, and TCG Medical for almost $7.9 million US plus interest and costs. Information related to the third case may not be disclosed at this time, said the agency. So one naturally begs the question of, why is the one not being disclosed? But 2, like, an $82 million contract, again, that seems like a lot of government spending. How is it that they're just able to not fulfill it? And how was it that we ended up granting it to a company that was incapable of fulfilling it, in the first place? And I'm pretty sure if you dive back into the old Matt McKeever archives on my other YouTube channel, you'll actually see that we covered this when originally it broke, that they weren't going to be able to actually meet the deadlines that were required. There was also some crazy shit going on with respirators in Quebec, but we'll actually save that for another day and another story. Moving on, though, and just hitting on a couple more points here. So in dollars, the cost of forged or fraudulent payments more than tripled from 7.9 million in 2019 to 2020. So again, to think about this, that, seeing fraud triple, seeing the number of government contracts that go unfulfilled, increasing at dramatic rates, and the fact that the number of cases is actually lower, again, just it really gets my spidey senses tingling and makes me concerned that there's probably a lot more going on beneath the surface. It could literally just be that that the auditors weren't capable of actually diving as deep in. Now, this is obviously me speculating, but not as capable of diving deep into things, because it's wild to think that our spending increased dramatically, that the number of the total dollar amount of fraud and mismanagement increased dramatically, and yet somehow the total number of cases was reduced by half. It just doesn't really add up to me. But again, maybe it turns out that we actually really improved dramatically in just those 3 bad cases that reached 105 million plus, that those were really the factor there. But again, I'm not really buying it. So moving on, let's and again, I really encourage you guys to do a full deep dive on this, because there's actually a lot covered in here. And again, this like we could have done an entire show just on this article because it's wild. And again, you can get deep into the details on how the money was mismanaged, how it was lost, how it was destroyed. And it's so frustrating to think that we're about to, in Quebec, pay a new health tax, and yet the government's constantly just throwing away our money and wasting it with really little regard for the average Canadian. And so just to really make sure that this red pill story hits home, I want to hit upon an article here from Blacklock's reporter. And if you guys haven't checked out Blacklock's, I'd really encourage you to do so. Now, their articles are behind a paywall, but I just think that they're a fantastic source for Canadian news. I strongly encourage you guys to actually go and get a subscription like I've done. They're actually one of the few news sites that I'm willing to pay for a subscription on. So diving into this one was in regards to recently the Chartered Accountant, the Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada made a submission to the Commons, essentially saying like, hey, MPs, you need to stop your spending because we don't actually just have blank checks in this country. And yeah, I 100% agree. So Statistics Canada last Tuesday confirmed the net federal debt per capita had increased 43% from pre-pandemic levels to a record of $24,074 for every Canadian. Deficits from the outbreak of the pandemic in 2020 have totaled $511.6 billion by federal estimate. Now, Parliament has not balanced the budget since 2007. Let that sink in. 2007. We haven't balanced the budget since 2007. 14 years. I mean, I'm sure you as just Joe Blow public, the average citizen, you're able to run a deficit for 14 years of your life without consequences, right? And then continue just to ramp up your spending by increased amounts every single year, going further and further into debt. I'm sure that it's no big deal. It blows my mind, and my CPA brain really does not appreciate all that crazy spending because have you noticed a huge benefit over the last couple of years? Yeah, no, me neither, actually. And so one last point here. Cabinet last year raised the federal debt ceiling by 56% under the Borrowing Authority Act from $1.168 trillion to $1.831 trillion. We need to be thoughtful and careful about managing government finances, Minister Freeland told reporters last October 26. Now, this probably could have doubled as the clown pill story of today because they don't actually give a fuck about balancing budgets. They think budgets balance themselves. And this isn't just the Liberal Federal Party. This is every single politician. Every single politician is part of the parasite class, and they all think that you really work and live to serve them and their end goals and purposes, rather than understanding that they're actually supposed to serve us. And in fact, they're not supposed to run crazy deficits because, hey, we're not able to run crazy deficits in our personal lives without consequences. So why would we assume that that's going to work on a provincial or federal level? And while emergencies may come up occasionally, they shouldn't come up for 14 years straight. It's wild to think that we haven't balanced a budget in 14 years because there's just no way any of the rest of us would be able to get away with that. So now let's move on to today's black pill story. And again, this is one that if you guys have been paying attention to the narrative, isn't going to necessarily surprise you. But have you guys noticed the narrative is evolving? And it's evolving now where all of a sudden it matters whether you have, whether you're in the hospital for COVID or with COVID. For the last year and a half, 2 years, you would have kind of been derided in the media. You would have been told that you're making a mountain out of a molehill. If you were to ask, well, how many people are actually in the hospital because of COVID versus in the hospital and happen to have COVID? Well, it turns out it's not an insignificant number. And this really helps paint a light on how our hospital system was already, taxed to its fullest extent. It was already at full capacity before we went into this pandemic. And there's no reason to believe that we're going to find a way out of it during the pandemic either. So it's wild to see the narrative evolving in real time. We've seen this come from the CDC recently, and we're seeing it now coming from Canadian health ministers and politicians as well. So diving into this first story from the Star, and again, links as always in the video description down below. In December, CDC Director Rochelle Walensky made the distinction while referencing COVID in children's hospitals. Many children are hospitalized with COVID as opposed to because of COVID, she said while on a call with reporters. On Tuesday, Minister of Health Christine Elliott tweeted, "While this doesn't change the serious situation in Ontario hospitals, it is important to share this data to provide additional context on the state of the pandemic. I think the biggest question we should all be having as Canadians right now is why now does it matter? And why hasn't it mattered for the last 2 years? Literally, why does it matter now, but it hasn't mattered for the last 2 years? Because for the last 2 years, they weren't concerned about this. For the last 2 years, they didn't want to talk about this whatsoever. And the fact that it turns out that about 54% of hospital cases right now are for COVID versus the remainder, which are with COVID, it, it actually has significant consequences. And not only significant consequences, but significant impact on how the average person is going to interpret what's going on in Canada and the US and every other market where this is occurring as well. So again, just the Toronto Sun here highlighting that Christine Elliott said 54% were admitted for COVID-19 and 46% tested positive after being admitted for other reasons. And now, again, if you guys have been following other news sources, there were stories last year coming out where I believe it was a man in California was shot and presumably died of the gunshot, but was actually pronounced as a COVID death. Now, we could go down an entire conspiracy theory about how potentially hospitals, doctors, and medical professionals are incentivized to want to report as many COVID cases as possible because that may impact their budget, may impact the allocation of resources they receive. But again, we'll leave that for another day and another story. But Health Minister Christine Elliott said the province will now distinguish between people admitted to the hospital due to COVID-19 infection and people admitted for other reasons with COVID-19. She said of the current hospitalizations, 54% of the people were admitted for COVID-19 and 46% were tested positive after being admitted to the hospital. And it's important to understand that throughout this entire period of time, right, there's been a lot of serious situations that are being punted down the road. And again, there's consequences to people, not just because of COVID, but because of delays in their surgeries and medical procedures and getting to see medical professionals. And so surgeries deemed non-urgent have also been paused for at least 3 weeks to free up hospital resources, affecting between 8 and 10,000 scheduled procedures weekly. Now, again, how are we ever going to catch up on this backlog? Spoiler alert, I don't think we ever are going to catch up on this backlog. And that should be very concerning for all of us. And the longer we continue to try and punt these problems down the road, the more we're going to see unintended consequences spiraling out of control. And all this just feels like it's going to continue to loop and continue to put more and more pressure on our health system. Again, the idea of firing or letting go medical professionals just because they're unvaccinated during a pandemic where for the last 2 years it was fine for them to work in the medical field, but now all of a sudden it's a line too far. Just it's hard not to be blackpilled sometimes about these stories. So moving on to a story from Toronto Sun. Now this is a column. So again, this is more anecdotal and anecdotal sources, but I really did want to highlight it here from Anthony Fury. So one major challenge is that the number of ICU beds are being occupied by people who no longer need to be in them, but there is nowhere to send them. When a patient is sent from a long-term care facility or retirement facility into the ICU, their home facilities can be reluctant to take them back, and some flat out refuse. Now, again, this is more of a complex situation than it would naturally seem. At first, you naturally want to be like, well, that LTC, the long-term care facility, should just have to take back their patient. But again, because likely the long-term care facility is filled with people that are higher at risk of having severe consequences because of COVID, naturally they don't want to necessarily take them on. We've had 2 years to try and build some sort of parallel institutions or build some sort of outlet where we could put these people, but instead we decided really just to penalize and demonize the unvaxxed rather than focusing on actually trying to expand capacity. Again, I'll leave you guys to do your own due diligence, but look at the number of ICU beds in Canada or in Ontario today versus like a year ago versus like 2 or 3 years ago. Somehow we haven't added any beds. Now, and some people will say that it's due to a multitude of reasons, and one of the biggest reasons behind this is simply a lack of staff. And so, again, it's great to have a bunch of bids, but if you don't have staff to manage those bids and take care of the patients, I mean, WTF are you going to do with all those bids? So, and this is a quote from one of the doctors. So by and large, staffing was cited as the key problem by everyone interviewed by the Toronto Sun. It's a staffing issue and nothing more than that, said one doctor. It's not a COVID issue, and I don't think people see that. And again, it's important to understand our health facilities were already at the breaking point pre-COVID, and we decided just to kind of ignore that and focus on other sorts of policies. And again, a lot of grandstanding from politicians, in my opinion. We decided to have an election instead of focusing on just pouring that money and all the other crazy spending we talked about earlier in the story for the red pill, instead of applying that to actually like our medical facilities. So finally, the firing of unvaccinated nurses has undeniably worsened things, doctors say. Some facilities, such as Niagara Health, are now bringing back unvaccinated staff members, which has healthcare workers wondering why other places aren't doing the same. Yeah, literally. I don't understand how we can have these different policies from different health units. If it's safe enough for unvaccinated people to come back into the Niagara Health unit, why can't they do that in other health units to try and help increase capacity, try and like relieve some of the pressure from the vaccinated health staff? And again, unless that person's already in an at-risk category, why does it even matter? It's wild. So anyways, and enough. Well, I guess one more little point I'm going to hit on here, and then we'll move on from the black pill into the clown pill, and maybe we can have a couple of chuckles. But this is from the Post Millennial. The CDC says over 75% of COVID deaths were in those with at least 4 comorbidities. Now, this is something that, again, isn't shocking to those of us that have been even half paying attention to what's going on in the world. But the fact that now they're coming out and stating this, now that they're starting to distinguish between with and for COVID hospitalizations, those of us that are black-pilled are really going to start scratching our heads and being like, what sort of narrative are they trying to set up for us next? Let me know in the comment section. Love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, and your perspective on everything we've talked about today so far. But let's move on to the clown pill. So there was actually 2 kind of clown pills I wanted to cover today, but I figured let's start off with the RCMP clowns, and then we'll move into maybe a slightly lighter story. So this is from Blacklocked. We've also got a similar article from the Post Millennial, but jumping into it here, essentially what we've got is RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki yesterday urged Canadians to report suspicious internet activity, including comments by people who express anti-government, anti-law enforcement opinions. The Mounties earlier praised federal proposals to censor legal web content deemed offensive. I'm pretty sure if they have their way, someday I'll find myself on the list. You guys will likely as well. And, we can wave to each other in the gulag. The RCMP yesterday issued a guide reporting suspicious incidents to police that encouraged internet users to watch for people with suspicious politics or anti-authority views. So I am anti-government. I'm anti-law enforcement. I believe they'd likely think that I've got suspicious politics or anti-authority views that include anti-government, anti-law enforcement, and anarchists. Yeah, ANCAP here, or maybe full-blown anarchists. You keep pushing me further and further down that trajectory, the more and more I see of what the government actually does. So building upon that, this category can encompass new and emerging ideologically motivated threats such as environment, animal rights, etc., said the guide. The goal of the initiative is to enhance the quality of information being shared with police and to encourage the reporting of suspicious incidents and activities. So, rat on your neighbor, essentially, is what the RCMP is asking you to do. I imagine that they've only got our best intentions at heart, right? Now, this is a really funny quote, in my opinion. Law enforcement has no role in policing the thoughts of Canadians, wrote the RCMP. Police will, however, take action to prevent crimes if there is evidence an individual is planning or preparing to commit an act of violence or to actively provide support to others doing so. So they're saying that they're not the thought police, but the RCMP earlier endorsed Bill C-36, an act to amend the criminal code that proposed up to a $70,000 fine or house arrest for internet users suspected of posting legal but offensive content. So literally, you could post legal but offensive content, and they want you to have up to $70,000 in fines or potentially suffer house arrest. But they're not the thought police, so don't worry about it. WTF. Literally, RCMP, you guys are clowns. And again, that doesn't mean that every RCMP officer is a clown, but you are absolutely led by clowns. And you guys need to speak up. You need to speak out against what's going on. You need, in my opinion, start refusing to enforce rules and laws that you believe are unlawful or wrong. And if you find yourself becoming the thought police, just understand that you're one of the bad guys. Law enforcement has to have the ability to use the law effectively. Corporal Anthony Statham of RCMP's British Columbia hate crimes team told a July 19 webinar sponsored by the federally subsidized Canadian Anti-Hate Network. So again, it just, while they may have the best of intentions behind these, there are going to absolutely be terrible consequences if we turn the RCMP into the thought police. It's wild. Literally, we live in clown world. But let's maybe take it to a slightly lighter note here, because this is a 2-for-1 clown special. This one is a pure LOL moment. NASCAR driver Brandon Brown signs 8-figure sponsorship deal with fuck Joe Biden. I mean, let's go Brandon coin, despite the ban on the sponsor. So again, if you guys somehow were sleeping over the last few months, there was that moment in time where essentially we saw the propaganda machine in full effect, where a reporter decided to interpret fuck Joe Biden chants from NASCAR fans as let's go Brandon, and the internet, being the internet, decided just to lean into it full tilt. And so now we've got songs that, top the charts. We've got literally an 8-figure sponsorship deal. And this is great because if you guys I don't really care one way or the other about NASCAR. And in theory, Brandon Brown, had this not happened, I wouldn't know he existed. But it actually is unfortunate. He lost a lot of his sponsors before this. And essentially, he was being ostracized because of the meme that became this moment in time that he had nothing to do with. And it's absolutely wild to see all this unfold. But it is great to see it kind of fold in on itself. This is 4D chess that the internet's playing with the Biden administration. So again, I'm actually really happy to see that. I don't know anything about Let's Go Brandon coin. I've got no interest in investing in it. It seems like a meme coin to me. That seems like a dangerous speculative market to invest in, but you got to admit, this is kind of an LOL moment. So switching gears here now, we're going to jump into the white pill. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I kind of struggled today to come up with a white pill moment. And I actually even asked Peter, the producer, if he had any, good news stories he saw today that he thought we should cover. And both of us ended up just twiddling our thumbs. So if you guys saw a great white pill story that we overlooked today, particularly with a Canadian bent, let me know in the comment section. As always, I want your guys' feedback on these as well. You can DM me story ideas. You can on Instagram or Twitter. You can also post them in the comment section, whether it's live or after the fact on these recordings. But I figured today's white pill story that I'd focus on is, if you guys didn't know, there's this crazy Canuck that bought essentially what he's calling a Citadel, a compound, whatever you want to call it, in Northern Ontario. And he's kind of just opening the doors wide open to interesting, unique individuals to come join him if you're of a like-minded spirit. Now, I'm actually talking about myself in case you guys haven't put 2 and 2 together. If you guys are interested in learning more about what we're doing at the Citadel, there's a link in the video description down below. Join the Discord, start participating in the community. There's a lot of really unique characters in there sharing their perspectives. We talk about all sorts of things. So if you want to ask me real estate questions, yes, you can go there and ask me real estate questions. If you want to talk about crypto, Bitcoin, Web 3.0, all that crazy shit and shenanigans, we're doing that as well. In addition, we've also got all kinds of information and resources for homesteaders, for people that are looking to homeschool or free school their children, and just people kind of building communities and networks with each other, because these are crazy times. I think it's more important now than ever before. You start actually finding people that you like and building deep, lasting relationships. Start building a community, not just online, but actually take that community into the real life world. That's what we're trying to do here with the Citadel. So again, if you guys haven't had a chance to check us out on Discord, I really encourage you to do so. I don't think you're going to regret it. I mean, you can join the Discord for free. Decide it's not your deal, you can peace out like that. No big issue. But again, I would love going forward to have more white pill stories. So you guys need to slide into my DMs or post comments on these videos and let me know what your thoughts and perspectives are. But jumping back to things, moving on from the white pill, now, let's get into the meme of the day. I really love these. If you guys have a meme that you want to cover, let me know. Hit me up again. Just forward it to me. Send me a DM, whatever. This is Luke from We Are Change. And it says, this is poetry in motion, in my opinion. The same people that took 20 years to replace the Taliban with the Taliban are now fighting the war with COVID. Yeah. We fought the Taliban for 20 years in Afghanistan, and we managed to replace them with the Taliban. Wonder how this COVID war is going to play out. Let me know your thoughts, your opinions, your perspective in the video description down below, or if you're watching this live, jump in there right now. And speaking of live chat, let's pull it up, and we'll check out a few of your guys' stories before we wrap up for the day. So hopefully you guys see that now on the corner right there. So we've got the Hungarian experiment. What's up, Peter? We've got Matthew. We've got Web3. We've got Alex Powell. I'm with you, brother. What a joke. Yeah, we literally live in clown world these days. Canada's getting crazy, yo. Yes. Maybe Canada was always crazy and we just didn't notice it up until this point in time, but it certainly seems like things are escalating these days. Michael Watch, really sad state of affairs when you see these things. Absolutely agree with you, Michael. And it's more important than ever before that we speak out. And again, like I said, it could literally just be you sharing a meme on your social media feed. It could be you having a tough conversation with a friend or a family member. It could be you just informing yourself further so that when you find yourself in those awkward conversations, you're able to dive a little bit deeper and share your perspective and maybe have some counterpoints ready. Now, again, I'm not saying to, berate or, try and like beat someone up in a verbal attack over your opinions or perspectives, but it is important that you make your voice heard, because right now the silent majority are doing none of us a service by letting this tyranny continue. It just, you let the government get away with anything, they're going to try and get away with everything. And the last 2 years have essentially been the proof in concept. Lisa says wrong. I'm not sure whether you're referring to one of our stories or articles, or whether you're referring to one of my opinions, or that just everything here going on in the world is wrong. If you believe that I missed something in one of these stories, let me know in the comment section. Share your sources as well. I'm always open to opinions and other perspectives, but I am really concerned about what's going on in Canada. We've got Graham, who's one of our Citadel members. I hear Quebec will waive the tax if you buy 8,000 liters of Quebec's maple syrup annually. There's a whole different rabbit hole if you guys want to go down and understand the maple syrup cartel, because it turns out that's actually a thing in and of itself. It's wild how much government intervention, government stated or enforced monopolies, and the unintended consequences of all those things. So a bunch of other comments going on here. Peter saying this is calling for civil unrest. We got Stephen, Matt, you are the man. Appreciate you and wish you well. Cheers. Appreciate that, Stephen. It really does mean a lot to me when you guys comment and interact on this content. And a reminder, if you guys want to participate a little bit more in whatever we're doing here or show some support, we've actually made our mailing address available. You'll find it in the video description down below. Want to send us a postcard, just a what's up, whatever it is. I love those things. It kind of makes the internet feel a little bit more real when I get a postcard or a letter from you guys. So again, want to make that available. It's just kind of a fun way for us to interact. Johnny's saying, make as much money as you can and get the hell out of Canada. Yeah, I certainly understand. And I don't necessarily want to throw shade at anyone that takes that opinion, but understand that I'm not sure if you can outrun what's going on right now. I think it's really up to us, the people, to stand up wherever you find yourself. Whether you're living right now in the US, Canada, or somewhere else, it's more important than ever before that you understand you need to speak out and speak up for your personal autonomy, because the government is not going to just naturally allow you to have it. And the last 2 years are really the proof in the pudding in regards to that. Web3 Greasy, sorry. My friend and I are watching and curious to hear about why you sold your real estate. Sure, I'll cover that real quick. Again, I don't want this video or this channel to get too absorbed with real estate information. But essentially, if you guys haven't been paying attention, actually today, January 11th, is when I finally closed on selling my last rental property. Now, there's a multitude of factors and reasons that led up to this. I'm going to oversimplify for the purpose of this video, but a few things I came to a few different conclusions. One, I don't think real estate's a bad investment. I don't think any of you watching this need to panic, sell, or get out of it. In fact, on the Canadian Real Estate channel, which there's a link in the video description down below, I shared on last Monday's live video my perspective that likely we're going to see still probably a 20 or 30% appreciation in Canadian real estate because of loose monetary policies, and because I don't think that any of the central bankers have the balls to actually raise rates significantly, which means that there's just going to continue to be a lot of cheap money sloshing around the economy and chasing any sort of hard asset. And yes, real estate's one of those hard assets that all that cheap money is going to chase. So again, I'm not saying you guys need to panic out of it, but a few things became very apparent to me. One is that I'm really proud of the success I've had between businesses and my real estate portfolio and what I'd built up to that point in time. But I really started looking towards the next generation and realizing that my nieces and nephew likely weren't going to be able to live the same sort of lifestyle or take on the same sort of challenges and have the opportunity to go from, lower middle class to whatever class you want to classify me as these days, but I certainly would like to think that I'm doing better than my parents did, and that's no shade thrown at them. But like a lot of us, we want to live that Canadian dream. We want to believe that we live in a world where you have control and you can improve your lot in life. And my biggest concern is that for my nieces and nephew, they're not going to actually be brought up in that world, right? They're right now in grade 1 kindergarten. They're not necessarily getting the same sort of education, and I don't think they're going to be presented with the same sort of opportunities unless at least a minority of us, unless at least some of us stand up and speak out about what's going on here in Canada and decide to really start making politicians aware that we're not okay with this. We don't all just want to live in the metaverse and be on UBI and have the government, govern us harder for the rest of our days. Some of us actually want to be responsible for ourselves. Some of us actually want to take on risks and be rewarded if we succeed by taking on those risks. And again, to me, I just see the culture wars as being so important that shows like this, that some of the other projects I'm taking on, I'm writing a rap song. If you guys didn't know, we'll probably have an entire rap album. I'm also writing a pilot for a cartoon show. And I think it's really important that those of us that are in the fortunate position to be able to fight the culture war, that we actually pick up the battle axe and decide to fight the culture war. Because while I can bitch and moan all I want about how silly and stupid and what a clown world it is that these politicians have created for us, it's important to understand that politics is actually downstream, or the culture wars are actually upstream of politics. So again, if you're not influencing the culture, if you're just one of those live and let lives, I totally respect that perspective. And for like the last 35 years of my life, that's been me. But if we continue to just be ostriches with our heads in the sand, there will be consequences for the next generation. They will not be able to have the same sort of opportunities as us. I've never been the sort of person that needed all the money in the world. At times, I kind of talked myself into wanting to build giant empires and just stack crazy money because it felt like a video game and let's get a high score because, hey, who doesn't love beating a video game? But I realized there's actually more to life than just having a bunch of money. And so I really want to start spending my time, energy, and resources on influencing the culture and trying to fight the culture wars because I'm able to, because I feel compelled to do so. So I appreciate you asking that question, Web3, and hopefully that answered your question, and hopefully that doesn't cause a panic amongst Canadian real estate investors. We got a noise site. I think that's what you're saying there. Appreciate it. Hey, what's up? We got Dave. Cheers. Graham saying the black pill story is odd. Something makes no sense for the mainstream media narrative to start saying these truths. Yeah, absolutely. It just, especially those of us that are black pilled, it's just like, I know I can't trust you, but essentially like, where's the poop, right? Like when you have a puppy and you can tell he just did something wrong, he's being a little bit bashful and you're like, there's shit somewhere in my house. That's essentially the way I kind of feel about politicians and how the mainstream media is evolving in regards to the black pill story we covered today. What's up, Tom? Appreciate much love to all the critical thinkers and truth seekers. Absolutely. I often bastardize this quote or paraphrase it, but from Thoreau, and he essentially said, rather than fame, than fortune, give me truth. That's all I want. Just treat me like an adult, tell me the truth, and I'll suck it up and deal with it, and I'll try and make the best of it. But those of you that try and coddle us, those of you that lie to us for our own good, I've got no patience and no real sympathy for you. So again, I really appreciate those of you that are constantly fighting the good fight, trying to keep yourself informed, that aren't just going to tune everything out and focus on whatever the mainstream narrative is. Alan Grace, what's up, Alan? They are now downplaying the cases, which were always a useless statistic, since this variant seems to have mutated around the jab. They're constantly manipulating how they report the data in order to push their narrative. It certainly feels that way, and I certainly don't disagree with you, Alan. Johnny saying healthcare system in Canada has been in trouble for over 10 years. Aging baby boomers should have been a problem seen miles away. Absolutely. 100% agree. I'm not sure what that is, but wow, rat pill. I'm not sure the reference, but there's a lot of different pills out there. I'm only familiar with the blue, the red, the clown, the black, and the white pill. Again, it is important. Maybe, and appreciate all those you jump in the comments. It's a wonderful problem to have, but I don't think I'm going to have a chance to hit all of your chats today. But again, really appreciate those of you that did jump in the chat. But I want to leave you with this. the point of me sharing the news or my perspective on these news stories isn't to get everyone hot and bothered and in a frenzy of like, we're all doomed, it's the end of the world as we know it. No matter where you find yourself in life, no matter what the hand you're dealt with, we all have the responsibility to play the hand we're dealt to the best of our extent. And it's important that you focus on what you can control. Now, can I control what the WEC or IMF or the Davos crew does? No, I probably can't directly influence them. But we all can directly influence local politicians. We can all actually have an outsized influence on provincial and federal politicians as well if we're willing to speak out, right? That idea of the squeaky wheel gets the grease. For the longest time, those of us on the right, the conservatives, the libertarians, the live and let live group, we've all just been focused on doing our thing. We thought, hey, government may not be perfect, but it's not that bad. So let's just keep doing our thing and focusing on us. But we need to also focus a little bit outside of just that tiny Venn diagram and expand it just a hair to make sure that we're actually not just focused on today, but we're also kind of planning for tomorrow. I mean, delayed gratification is how I got to this point in life. And I think that we all need to delay a little bit of gratification to make a culture war to whatever extent you're capable of doing so. Again, maybe you don't agree with me on everything. Maybe you don't agree with me on anything. I'm not saying that you shouldn't also be trying to fight your own culture war, but odds are, if you're on the left, if you are one of those individuals that believes in CRT, that believes in transhumanism, that believes in some of that other crazy shit that we're not going to go down too much of a rabbit hole or else I'll find myself canceled before we even really get any momentum on this channel. Odds are those individuals, they're already really focused on fighting the culture war. They're already trying to influence textbooks. They're already trying to influence, they've already captured Ivy League schools and the post-secondary campuses. And it's up to us to start really starting to push back, to start influencing things, to start building parallel institutions. At this point in time, I'm kind of focused on more of an acceleration rather than trying to salvage what we have. I'm not sure that we can really salvage what we got. So let's just start building parallel institutions, whether that's you contributing to some sort of homeschool curriculum, whether that's you participating in local volunteerism, right? There's a lot of opportunities for us to make the world a better version of itself, and no one else is going to do it. So we all need to just kind of roll up our sleeves and get into it. I hope that this video and these series of videos I'm going to produce every single weekday help you guys, and appreciate those of you watching. Smash the like button, hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. I'll be back here on Wednesday. Again, you do you. Focus on what you can control, but don't completely ignore the culture wars either. And hopefully you understand how I'm trying to make that balance with you guys. But again, really appreciate you guys hanging out with me 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll see you tomorrow.